Hi, I'm Dustin Lukey.
And I'm Candace Price. This is another edition of Hometown Conversation.
We're working to bring together community members to talk freely and openly about ways we can make effective, positive change in our community.
Yes, we want to be a platform of education, understanding, and empathy.
So we're here with District Attorney Tim Gruenke and Suthakaran Veerasamy from UW-La Crosse. Thank you both for being with us for this edition of our Hometown Conversation. The focus this time is on criminal justice and criminal justice reform. Obviously, it's been something that La Crosse has talked about for seemingly a number of years in one regard or another. The Criminal Justice Management Council has been around for a while. So how have recent events shifted the focus and kind of brought that back into the focus?
The Criminal Justice Management Council has for years, decades, worked on issues within our system. Everything from populations of the jail, programming in the jail, a woman's house, Ophelia's house came out of that, the drug court, OWI court. La Crosse has always been trying to be progressive in our system and trying to figure out what works best for our community. We've talked about race before with disproportionate minority contacts within our system, within our jail. And so we've done some research and some talking about it over the last years, but the recent events kind of brought it back to the forefront. And we decided to set up a few committees to try to investigate it further and respond to what we thought were the highest priorities the community wanted. Better training or more training for police. The issue of SROs, school resource officers in the schools, and then a citizen advisory board that the mayor wanted to start in the city. So we thought we'd dive into those and see if those would help improve our system.
One of the major conversations right now are the SROs and how they may contribute to the school to prison pipeline. What's your take on that?
Do you want to take it first or me first? The school board is going to make that decision, and so our job in the Criminal Justice Management Council is to kind of give them an opinion, and so there's a committee formed right now to kind of investigate that. Have they been a help? Have they been a hindrance? Have they contributed to the school to prison pipeline? Have they increased our arrest, increased safety? All those things are being considered by a committee. Once they kind of come up with their response, we'll do the school board an opinion or maybe pros and cons. In my own personal experience as a district attorney, it's been a positive. I've not heard a whole lot of negative stories from the SROs. We've had a lot of good outcomes from people who have gone to SROs to stop trouble before it started, to help officers in the schools get to know the kids better, the kids know the officers better, but most of that's anecdotal. So I think the committee is going to look a little bit more deeper into the numbers and the research and get some data and try to be evidence-based about it and try to get a good recommendation for the school board. So anecdotally, I've heard a lot of good things about the SROs. Nationally, I've heard bad things, but in La Crosse, I don't know if those things have been happening here. And hopefully the committee can come up with some good recommendations for the school board to make an informed decision.
Now, Sutha, just talking about the idea of systemic racism, how do the schools kind of play a part in that, in that idea that, I mean, these are systems that we're born into, we grow up in?
Now, I think Tim and I are in a subcommittee where we're looking at how best to train police officers. So when you look at what's happening right now and how police officers are implicated in everything that's going on, I think we're paying the price for not dealing with this issue, when they were children. I can talk about my daughter here. She's in 6th grade. Yes, just recently, I do talk to her about what's going on right now. I have 2 children, and so during supper one night, I asked her, "So, are you learning anything about slavery at school?" She's in middle school, and she said, "Oh, yeah, we did learn something about slavery." "Oh, what did you learn?" "Well, we learned about how slavery ended." See, to me, that kind of says it all, right? So we talk about how slavery ended, yes? So How about slavery started, yes, in 1619, yes, some of us have heard of that year, and it's seen as the year that slavery began in the United States. And they're not talking about that, right? And so now we're providing training to police officers. See, as far as I see it, it's to kind of overcome all the biases and the stereotypes that were inculcated in them. See, what they have learned throughout, yes? And so you just asked about SROs, and one of the things that we know, yes, research in psychology, yes, especially in terms of implicit bias, what we're learning is that implicit biases don't go away. See, no matter what you do, they don't go away. So the racist beliefs that we have, the sexist beliefs, the homophobic beliefs, they don't go away. Now, on the flip side, however, you can create new beliefs, you see, right? So if you have very racist beliefs towards, let's say, people of color, right, you can create new beliefs to kind of override those old implicit beliefs. And we also know through studies that the only way that can happen, the only effective way that can happen is by having people interact with people of color, yes? By interacting with people who are lesbians and gays to overcome homophobia, yes? And so when I hear something like SROs, and then we are quick to remove SROs from schools, and I'm thinking here is a wonderful opportunity, yes, for police officers to come into contact, to overcome some of those biases just by interacting with quote unquote normal, yes, people of color, yes, not so that when they make contact, they're not making contact with people of color who have been indulging in criminal activities, see. Right?
So that's not their only interaction.
There you go. Yes, that's not the only interaction. Yes. So now they can create new beliefs. See, new beliefs, and they can kind of go, wow, these folks are no different than these white people I've known all my life. Yes? And that can only happen through interaction. And here we are trying to take away a wonderful opportunity for this. See, if there's a problem with something that's going on within these interactions, look into it. Try to fix the problem within this wonderful opportunity for interactions to happen. Don't remove the whole thing. As the saying goes, what is it? Don't throw the baby out of the bathwater, right?
Well, one of the bigger complaints that we're hearing is that it means that some students are having a criminal record when they're still in school. They're starting their criminal record younger because we have SROs in school. So what about that?
And I think this is now, I'm not letting the police off the hook. Now, don't get me wrong, you see. I think this is a wonderful opportunity to listen to some of the complaints that the students are making. Yes, something is coming out of this where some students are not feeling comfortable, some parents are not feeling comfortable. Now you need to sit down with those students, with those parents, yes, and you need to listen to them. Okay, what are some of the issues you have within the structure here? You see, don't get me wrong, I'm not letting the police off the hook, you see. So this is where both folks, yes, both groups need to come together and look at the issues. See.
Now, you two are friends that go back a while. How do you have these difficult conversations about race?
He usually tells me I'm wrong, and then I try to listen and learn. And
well, we all have a lot we can learn from each other.
Yes. Well, I think we both have a kind of a similar outlook on life, which helps. And I think we both are students of history and like to learn. And so I think you have to have some intellectual curiosity to try to change yourself. If I were the type of person that didn't really care about learning or thought I was fine the way I am, I probably wouldn't have connected and we wouldn't have talked. But I think one lesson I would have for white people is we need to stop saying things like, well, I'm not a racist. I mean, that's really not something you can judge about yourself. It's like saying, I've got a good sense of humor, or I have good common sense. That's kind of something other people really judge about you. You can't just say it and make it so. So instead of having that defensiveness, maybe try to listen to somebody who's willing to talk that might be a person of color. Why do you say that? Why do you have that feeling? And listen instead of trying to talk and defend. And I guess I've always been interested in learning more and learning from other people. And Suth has got a lot of knowledge that I don't have otherwise. So I think we enjoy talking about, trying to learn about things from each other, and but you have to have that, at least that seed of wanting to learn. You have to first admit, I don't know everything, I want to learn more. And I think two people are closed off to say, I know, I'm right, and it's hard to reach those people, but you have to put your guard down a little bit and say, maybe I have something to learn and I can grow a little bit.
I feel very fortunate, to know someone like Tim. I don't know if I've told him that, if I haven't.
I felt it.
Okay, good. and the reason for that is, but I mean, there are things that I want to say, not just as a person of color. This is my work, right? This is my work, and I have an understanding of this issue in ways that most people don't. And so when I begin this conversation, especially with the white person, right away they say, I'm not a racist. That's it. See, they've lost me. And to get through that wall, it's energy sapping. It saps my energy, you see. And so I've come to the point where the moment someone says that, see, I back off. It's like, okay, I'll meet you some other time, maybe down the road, you see. And the fact that you just heard him, right? He's comfortable saying that. It's like, I can't just simply say I'm not a racist and walk away. And so when someone says that, you see, it kind of it makes me feel like it's okay. It's worth my while to sit with you and have a conversation with you. See, because I can hope to get somewhere. See, instead of you throwing everything back in my face and saying I'm somehow wrong. Yes. The experience, my life experiences, my knowledge, yes, all that doesn't count for anything, yes, because you simply said that you're wrong. See, so you get to define reality for both of us, see, and my reality here, especially with this issue, doesn't count, you see, right? So I know we have continued to have discussions, and sometimes it get intense, but that's part and parcel of talking about these issues.
That's how you grow.
Yes.
I think for a lot of people of color entering the justice system, they feel that the cards are automatically stacked against them. So how do we address some of these maybe implicit biases that people who are in power in the justice system may have, and maybe what do people of color, what can they learn about the justice system to better equip themselves to deal with some of these biases?
It's a very good question and an important question, and I think it's something we have to keep searching for the answer. We don't have that yet. Obviously, if we knew how to fix it, we would have done it long ago. And I've been telling people, you can't slowly gain weight over a couple of years and then lose it in a day. It's going to take time. And I think racism is kind of the same way. We've been in the situation where the card has been stacked against people of color for a long time. It's not going to go away in a day or a month. It's going to take a lot of work. And so the first step, I think, is just being aware of it for people in the system and understanding, again, listening more than talking and thinking we know what we're doing is right, and trying to research that and think about it and just sit with it for a while and just understand at first that there's a problem before we start coming up with solutions. Americans tend to just throw out solutions when there's a problem very quickly and not really know if it's going to even fix the problem or maybe make it worse. So I think from people in the system, we have to try to figure out how to improve that. It's going to take a lot more than just people in the system changing, though. It's going to take the community, the schools, the universities, the health systems, everybody, to try to change that feeling that people have. And then I think people of color also have to try to be part of that solution as well and try to figure out how can we make that better. But I certainly don't have the answer, and I'm not going to suggest today what people should do other than we've got two ears and one mouth for a reason. We should listen twice as much as we talk and just try to understand the problem, and it's going to take some time, and I think we need to be careful not to just throw the baby out with the bathwater and just say, here's our decision and that's going to fix it, because oftentimes we find a year later that didn't fix it, and maybe it's even worse now. So that's from my perspective within the system. I think we all need to do a better job of continuing to listen and work at it as far as people of color coming to the system. I don't know if you have a perspective on that.
Oh, I do. you have to bear with me. And I guess, thinking about our conversation today, I think this is the main point I wanted to share. And I think some of us, hopefully most of us have heard about that incident in New York where that bird watcher, that incident where the white woman with the dog, he told her to leash her dog, and she just kind of blew up and got very rational and said, "I'm going to call the police because you're threatening my life." By the way, I watched the video right before I came just to be sure that that's what she said. That's what she said, right? "I'm going to call the police and say that you're threatening my life." So, and Candace, you're talking about systemic racism, you see. Now, essentially racism, you can look at it in three different ways. One is systemic, one is individual, and the third one is actually cultural. And the cultural racism is kind of that superordinate umbrella. See, so the individual and systemic racism, institutional racism, comes under cultural racism. So what is cultural racism? Okay. So cultural racism, we are beginning to talk about it right now. See, when we say these notions of white supremacy, see, so what does that mean, notions of white supremacy? And this is the thing too, and I think I have to address this too. When someone hears the word white supremacy, well, that doesn't apply to me because that's the KKK. See, no, we live within a culture, within a context that celebrates that. See, for example, I have a very simple example for you. I teach psychology. Yes, I don't teach intro to psychology anymore, but there was a time when I taught that very regularly. Introduction to psychology. Yes, when you open a textbook on introduction to psychology, yes, I'm flipping through the pages. Do you think it mentions anything about how the Chinese, how the Indians, how the people in the Middle East perceive psychology? All I see are the statements and the findings, the scientific findings of white guys, mainly, or dead white guys. Now, how is this introduction to psychology? You should call it introduction to Western psychology or introduction to white people psychology. Do you see? See, that is systemic racism. See, that is cultural. Now, systemic racism that comes from cultural racism, because cultural racism has to do with the celebration anything that's white. So then you can ask, why is that? See, because underneath everything we do, now these are the things that we need to take ownership of. And I'm very aware right now, yes, when I bring this up, yes, most of you here are white. You see, these are the things that can make you uncomfortable, but you have to be able to sit with it. See, you have to be able to sit with this because I am addressing facts. See, these are facts. If you don't believe me, go check it out. Yes, everything. Yes, if I were to go to the union right now, I said, wow, I'm an Indian dude. I feel like some Indian curry. What are my chances of getting Indian curry? Look at the menu. Yes, somebody decided that this is the menu that we should serve everyone here. And then we call this a melting pot. How is this the melting pot? See, it's all around us. Now, if you dare look, if you choose to look, you can see it. Everything around us is a celebration of whiteness, because underneath everything there is this perception, this is belief that. See, and this is what we mean by implicit bias. Yes, it just feels right. Somehow, white people are superior. See. And you see, this is also, the implicit bias is not only within white people, it's also in people of color. We also have to work through that. I had to work through that. You see, I grew up in Malaysia, a British colony. Trust me, I feel like I was more white than Indian. You see, and slowly I had to learn my heritage about my people's contribution. The first time I heard that the number 0 was the contribution of Indian people, I didn't want to believe it. I said, no, it must be the Greeks. You got it wrong. No. See, I, an Indian person, I couldn't bring myself to believe that. Why is that? You see, this is how powerful it is, this notion of white supremacy. So it not only applies to white people, you see, it's a state of mind, yes, that we are all, right, it's like we are mesmerized by it. And so when we talk about systemic racism, now, I hope people don't get me wrong, because you see, in a way, I don't want to just talk about the police, because systemic racism is not just the problem with the police. You see, I'll use myself as an example again. Let's say I get into an altercation with someone in my department, in psychology department. It's a white person. Yes? Now, this white person who gets into an altercation with me, they might not think twice about going to human resources to report me. I'm going to think twice, maybe even 3 times, going to human resources to report this person. Why is that? Because I know who's going to talk to me. It's going to be most probably a person who looks like this person than me. So whose story, whose narrative do you think is going to sound true to them? You see, I'm not talking about the police right now. You see, of course, the police makes news because the systemic racism in the police force, see, when it goes wrong, somebody dies. But you see, within the system that I am in, something goes wrong, the worst that happens is somebody gets fired. And people getting fired don't make news. They don't make good news, do they? You see, but this is happening all the time. People are getting fired left and right. People of color, yes, people of color not being promoted, people of color not being hired because of this systemic racism that comes from cultural racism. This notion that people of color are the ones whom we should look out for. Somehow their lives mean more than the lives of people of color. See, somehow their words, their truth means more. Yes? See? So this underlies our culture. So we need to explore that first before we can understand systemic racism. And what is frustrating to me right now, we are talking about systemic racism, but we can only address systemic racism within the criminal justice system. And I'm going, what? You have this problem in the criminal justice system because you've not addressed systemic racism everywhere else, your schools. What the heck are you teaching your children? Look at the history you're teaching your children. It's a joke. In Malaysia, I have a better perception of the history of this country. By the way, I had to learn about your history, yes, and your geography. I have a better perception of the history of this country than the children in this country do. Doesn't that say something? Why is that? Who decided that? For what purpose? See? So then this manifests itself in terms of individual racism. So going back to this woman, you see, here is a black man who told her simply, leash your dog. If you notice the video, she didn't get angry. Yes, she got upset. And that upset is, how dare you, black man, tell me what to do? That's not the order of things. I, a white woman, should be telling you what to do. How dare you tell me? See, she got upset because her entitlement, I think we have names for women like this now. Don't we call them Karens? Yeah. Yes. And for the men, we call them Chads. Yes. See? I'm glad we are now using these terms because people can understand what we're talking about. See, these have always been there. These are nothing new. People of color have always experienced it. These are nothing new. It's just that now because of cell phone, these behaviors are being recorded now for everyone to see. Here you go. There you go. See? And then what did she say? Yes, I'm going to call the police and say my life is being threatened. You see, she unconsciously or consciously is aware. See, she knows that if I call the police here right now, who are they going to listen to? So here's a manifestation of individual racism. Yes, how dare you black men tell me what to do? And then she goes to systemic racism, the police force, to come and support her. Isn't this beautiful? You see, if this black dude didn't have that phone, that recording, can you see what might have happened to him? Who do you think the police are going to believe? And most white people are aware of this. You see? So, and people like me, people of color like me, we are also aware of what the police means to us. So we are not as eager to call the police to involve in them in anything that happens to us. Right? We have to think twice, really? I want to call the police right now? Do you see? And so do you see, it's like there are two different narratives in this country. See, it's almost like we are all living two different lives, two different realities. See? And hopefully, with what's happening right now, we can somehow find a passageway to make these two realities, yes, connect these two realities, so people in this reality can get a glimpse of what it's like to live your lives in this reality.
So as a white man who's grown up in this society, and hopefully both of you can kind of speak to that as you already have. How do we start looking in the mirror and seeing this and being comfortable with seeing this?
Well, like I said before, the first step is just that, just to recognize that we do have things about us that are the product of how we grew up. And we're not perfect, and you can't just say, I'm not racist and walk away. You do have to listen to it and try to explore it, and it's going to be uncomfortable. And that's where some people will put up their walls. But you have to be willing to, as Sutha will always say, sit with that. Just understand the uncomfortableness and just sit with that so that you can understand, why am I feeling uncomfortable? Why is this changing my worldview? To kind of back up what Sutha was saying about the police, right now the focus is on the police, and they do have some issues in this country, but I'm a little bit surprised at the people who demand the police, not be racist anymore. And I think, well, they came out of the same schools and churches and neighborhoods that everybody else did, so they didn't just become racist when they became police. It's not just like they flipped a switch and now the police are the racist ones and we're all okay. I think we all have to take ownership of it. Why are the police that way? What do we teach them as children? What did they learn? And what are we telling them now? And how are all of us involved in this? And also, it's not just people have a perception that police might be pulling people over who are people of color because the police are racist. But a lot of police calls, who calls the police? This woman, like in the park. That's how the police get involved. So it's the community that calls people maybe more often on people of color than on white people. It's either the schools or the businesses that might call quicker for a person of color. So the police are just kind of responding and reinforcing that, but it doesn't always start with them. It starts with our entire community. And so as a white person, I think we all have to have that kind of realization, that epiphany at some point, that, wow, maybe I really haven't been seeing this right. Maybe I could learn a little bit, read a book, watch a movie, talk to somebody. For me, fortunately, it happened earlier on in my life. I grew up in a very small town in Wisconsin, no people of color at all. I only saw them on the news, on the Milwaukee News Channel, so it was almost like crime. That's the only way I saw people of color or sports, and I didn't know a single person. And when I was 18, I started working in a factory in Milwaukee. It was almost all people of color except me. And suddenly I realized that I was 19 years old, and this guy sitting next to me was Chuck. I still remember him. He was 19, and he was from Mississippi, came to Milwaukee, and he started talking about the show he watched last night. Hey, I watched that show. He started talking about the Packers. Hey, I like the Packers. And he realized, well, he's not a criminal. He does the same things I do. And it was that kind of light bulb that said, there are people like that out there that aren't on the news committing crimes. He's a real person with a real name, with a family. And then he told me that every day after walking home from school, he got stopped by the police. Now, I grew up in a town with no police. I'd never been stopped by the police ever. And I couldn't believe it. And so he educated me a little bit about that there's another world out there that I had no concept of. Now, we didn't get into deep discussions like we are now, but at least I had that kind of light bulb moment that, I noticed that. And so I think everybody that has lived in this society has to look in the mirror and say, what have I done to contribute to this? Have I ever thought about this? Do I know how other people are living? And seek out some way of learning more about it. There's plenty of resources out there now, especially, that you can actually dive into the history of our country that's kind of eye-opening when you don't really hear about it. Sutha talked about slavery, we talked about how it ended. But after that, there was the Reconstruction period where they passed laws and intimidated black people not even registered to vote. And then going into the 20th century, we had the Klan in the 20s and the 30s.
And all the statues, the Civil War monuments that we see coming down now.
And that's where they came from, was literally the 20s, to intimidate people of color to not vote. And in the 50s and 60s, we had still had Jim Crow laws. I mean, that's in our lifetimes. This isn't that long ago, where people were literally separated by color. And so to think that that would just go away because that ended, again, it takes longer to get rid of those things for a couple of generations than just take a statue down and say we're done with that. So I think white people need to take a time to think about this a little deeper than we have.
Tim hasn't mentioned something because, when I started to interact with him, and, again, I think this is a survival mechanism for people of color. When you talk to people of color, they know what I'm talking about. You see, we try to figure out how far we can go with the white person talking about this issue, right? And I checked him out. It's like, wow, he's sitting with it. Wow, sitting with it. So finally, when we knew each other well enough, I asked him, so tell me something about your background, right? How you seem to have a sense. You forgot your roommate, Tim.
Oh, yes. In law school, talking about, I had a roommate. I lived with a black roommate, a Native American roommate, and a gay roommate. It's all the same guy. So, and that was eye-opening for me too.
That's a lot of education.
Yes,
Right.
and he would talk to me too. That at that time, this was in the early '90s when the discussion was: are gay people born or a choice? And I had never met a gay person before either, much less lived with one. And so he started talking to me about his experiences. And again, that was eye-opening, that I had never thought of that before. I had never considered that before. And so, it was very eye-opening to hear his life. So just experiencing that, like you said, just talking with somebody will be eye-opening. Well, I should say listening. Don't just talk, but try to actually listen and learn. But have a conversation that you actually pick up something from it. But that's those experiences that I've had, just hearing people from a different perspective is pretty eye-opening. And there's a lot of people in Wisconsin, especially, that could probably go decades without running into a person of color. Not La Crosse, but go up north a little bit. Where I grew up, the entire community has never interacted with a person of color. They're not there. And so that changes your view of them, obviously. And so then you do have to just do some work to teach yourself some things.
Well, I want to revisit what you said about the two realities, because I think that's important. One thing we know that you already said is that white supremacy can generate this reality for certain people where they believe they are superior because someone has said that, because the environment around you says that. But what about this reality where you're told, because you're a person of color, you're a criminal? You're someone who's going to do something bad. And if you're told that repeatedly at a young age, that can become a manifestation of a certain reality for you, where you now do become a criminal, or you do decide, well, if this is how people are going to see me, this is who I am. So just from a psychology perspective, I'd like to have that discussion.
Sure. This is something I teach about. Actually, I show this wonderful video. People study this. It's in children. Before, it used to be 4 years old. By 4 years old, what you're talking about is already ingrained. Now it's 3. By 3 years old, children have already ingrained these beliefs. And these beliefs that somehow I'm not as smart, I'm not as pretty, yes, I can never be as competent, see. And so within the field of multiculturalism, see, the term we use is internalized racism. That's different from just racism. Racism is for white people, right? Just like internalized sexism is for women. Sometimes you have mothers telling their daughters, well, you might want to consider being a nurse because doctor, that's for the boys. This is a mother telling a daughter, right? See, so what is that all about? You see, the mom has heard all the messages, the stereotypes about women out there. See? And so now she has this implicit belief, this implicit bias that women cannot be, doctors. They cannot hope to be doctors, you see? And so that's being transmitted to her daughter. So just like that, you see, it's the same thing with racism. So people of color, also have work to do. And this is the point, actually, I can bring that within the context of criminal justice, because I'm always challenging folks who are quick to respond by saying, well, it's difficult to diversify our police department because nobody wants to come here. Okay? Now, systemic racism. So if you have systemic racism in place, right? So now, if you're a healthy person of color, would you want to come into a system that's racist? I mean, you have to sit with that and ask that question, you see? See, I want to go, right? I'm sure all of us want to go and work in a place where we feel appreciated, welcomed, yes? Right? So I come in, I interview, and then right away, all I need are 2 or 3 incidents, yes? Oh boy, I know where I am. See? So why would I come to this place and what I mean by healthy is someone who is aware, a person of color who is aware of racism, yes? And so now I feel oftentimes, and it's not just with the criminal justice department, it can even be in an academic department, yes? You have people of color in an academic department who are very comfortable. They're comfortable because they are willing to toe the line. And sometimes these people of color are more white than the white people in those departments. You see, because there is an understanding, in order for me to be comfortable, to be accepted, to be rewarded in this environment, I have to carry myself a certain way. Do you see? So now when we're talking about systemic racism from that perspective, you see, if you bring in a person of color and this person of color becomes a police officer in this department, see, I have to wonder, wow, you're comfortable here? Yes, I am. You feel welcomed? Yeah. Huh, really? Why? Do you understand what I mean? You see, how come you feel comfortable here when most people of color don't want to have anything to do with this department? See? Now, this is how complex racism gets, because the thinking is somehow all people of color get it. See, and I often kid around with my students, right? Really, all people of color just, the moment you're born, you get it. So you're born with a gene right here that somehow you understand racism and all the effects of racism when you're born. Really, that's how it works? You see? No, we also have to do the work, you see. And I think that work is just as difficult to overcome, yes? Just as racism is difficult to overcome for white people.
Mm-hmm. So I guess having conversations like this is a step in the right direction, right?
I was actually going to follow up on what Tim was saying, because I had a wonderful conversation. Monica Crosse, she's the chair of the county board right now. So she kind of asked the same question that you asked. It's like, so how do I, right? And she said, well, we get together, we read books. And so I asked her, yes, so who are the people in this book club? They were all white women. Now, I'm not going to say don't do that. Yes, read. Yes, right? Read, fine, read. Form book clubs. Talk about, what you're reading with a group of white friends, fine. But you cannot say that just because you're willing to do that, oh, we are done. You see? I mean, if you just look at it rationally and logically, how are you done? You see, because all of you are bringing the same perspective about race, right? You see, and when you read the same book, so how much tension is there going to be amongst all of you? Yes, right, because all of you are going to be saying the same thing. So I said, sooner or later, you have to now go out, talk to a person of color, bring in a few people of color, have them read the same book and see what's the narrative they are seeing. Are they seeing the narrative differently from you? See? So you cannot just read a book and say, okay, I got it now. No, you don't. See? You have to have conversations like this. You're going to walk away probably upset. That's good. Frustrated, even better. Because that frustration is going to come from when you begin to see the enormity of this problem. I think most people who talk about this issue, they just don't understand how enormous this is. And so they're quick to come and help because they're thinking, oh, let's just make a few tweaks here and there, then we'll get it. No. See, right? This need, right? This willingness and need to fix things, see, that's where it's coming from. They don't really understand the problem, the enormity of the problem. See, so they want to help. And so you're going to walk away frustrated because you're beginning to see, wow, this is a lot bigger than I thought it was.
Every time I talk to Suth, I tell him he makes me feel uncomfortable. And I mean it as a compliment because he enjoys that. So
well, he's challenging you.
I say, thank you for making me feel uncomfortable again. And he's proud of that. But he's right. If you want to change something, you've got to have a little bit of out of your comfort zone. Otherwise, you'll just stay the same. And most people don't want to do that. So it is tough. I mean, this is not easy for me, speaking as a white person. This isn't easy. It'd be much easier to just, play my golf and listen to my music and do my woodworking and just ignore all this and not have it in my head. Because it does take work. It's active work. You can't just, like you said, read a book or have one conversation and have it done. But if you want to make things better, I think you have to do the work. And it's not going to be easy work, but you have to do the work.
And what about that perspective of you then, from the side of the criminal justice system that people see you as the district attorney or see police officers? Vice versa, having that conversation with people and showing them too that you're just a person like everybody else.
Yeah. I try to lead by example and show people that, I'm not going to say I'm not racist, and I'm trying to show them that this is important work. And whether it's talking to people like Sutha, whether it's bringing it to the council, whether it's talking about it within our own office, I try to show people that this is something that we all need to do. And there's not just one way to do it. Everyone has different ways of learning things. But wherever possible, I try to encourage people to do this. I will say, I think everybody in the system recognizes that this is an issue. And I think everybody recognizes we need to do something about it. It's the stumbling block of, well, now what do we do is the problem. It's an enormous problem. There's not an easy fix. But I will say that I think almost everybody in our system in this county is working on it or willing to work on it, willing to come to the table, willing to come to the council, willing to engage in conversations. And maybe some more than others, but everybody at least is willing to have the conversation, which is at least a good sign in this community that we're at least willing to do this. But it's not an easy fix, and you run into many obstacles, politics, budgets, distractions, other things are still going on. So we have a lot of plates to spin, but I think everybody's willing to recognize that we need to work on this. And you can only hope that we're going to make progress, but you have to try.
Well, something tangible that I think a lot of people do talk about is that you sometimes have people who have committed the same crimes, but they face different charges. We recently saw this major story where two protesters both got charged by police while they were doing the exact same thing, doing a demonstration. And one received a first-degree rioting charge, which is a felony, and the other one received, unlawful demonstration, which was just a misdemeanor. And that's the sort of thing that I think, and by the way, one was a person of color and one wasn't, and I think you can guess who received what. Both together the entire time received these very different charges, and I think this is something that when we look at the criminal justice system and we wonder, well, how do we stop that from happening? Shouldn't it be very defined of what sort of charge you can get for the same sort of crime, and why isn't that happening? Why maybe something that public doesn't understand about why that happens.
And that's something that goes, even beyond race and probably involves other issues as well, money, status, gender. That's because we have so many laws and we have so many options and police have so much discretion, it's hard to manage from above that everyone's going to get the same thing, because there's always variables you can point to. And sometimes it might be legitimate. This person has a record of doing this person does not. But sometimes it's illegitimate, where this person seems like a good person because they're wearing a tie, and this person doesn't because they're wearing baggy clothes. And then you get to the obvious race or gender. So the only way to address it is training and supervision. So a supervisor to monitor those and say, what happened here? Let's change this. Or let's train the officers to be aware of that and take that into account when they're dealing with people. Because officers have discretion when they stop somebody. You can give them a warning, or you can give them a ticket. You can give them 2 tickets or just 1. And that's just at the very bottom level. When it gets to the DA's office, we could charge somebody or not, felony, misdemeanor. And the judges can do prison, probation, jail, community service. There's so many options in our system, there's a lot of discretion. And the way to combat the discrepancies is, first of all, training, policies, but then supervision as well. And addressing issues when they come up, and then appropriate discipline as well. You've heard about some officers having a lot of discipline issues and still on the force. I'd say that would be pretty rare in La Crosse County. When I heard this one person had 18 complaints, I've never heard anything that high in La Crosse County. But around the country, that's obviously a problem. There's obviously an issue where police have been kept on the force too long, and where some departments don't have the appropriate amount of training or the amount of supervision that's needed to address those issues. So that's my only answer, is to try to prevent it from happening, and then when it does happen, try to address it through proper supervision and then discipline if necessary.
Even that, it seems like there is that systemic cultural bias in it. You mentioned somebody wearing a tie, maybe getting better treatment, and that's, Sutha, how does that factor into this just outlook that we have?
I think, you see, Candace, I think, we can come up with all kinds of examples like this. Yes, this is what's And it's becoming more obvious right now. I think that's what we're trying to address here, you see. There is something systemically going on, so systemic racism, yes. So institutionally, we have policies, we have practices, we have structures in place that advantages one group of people, yes, compared to another group of people, see. And once again, I'm not downplaying the problems of the police, because I want to highlight this. It's in all systems. See, it's in all systems. And
can I interject? The systems intersect when you've got, for example,
yes.
Money is helpful in the criminal justice system compared to no money. But historically, what group of people has more money than not? So it's money, but it's also race. So there's some intersection going on between all the systems where this person has a job, this person has money, this person does not have a job, does not have money. But that's not the only difference. The difference is also why don't they have a job and why don't they have money? So the overall system has created the separations that compound the race issue.
And Tim, yes, some people have money, some people don't have a job. But then when you bring in race, you ask who has the money and who has the job, right? Somehow it seems like race seems to underlie everything else in this culture, you see, right? Race, seems to underlie everything else. And that's why it's also interesting. I can talk to my students comfortably, yes? Gender, sexuality, religion, that's my other area of expertise, not for today, right? Religion, I can talk about it, they will talk. I bring up racism, guess what happens? See, right there, that says something, doesn't it? See, right there, why is there reluctance to talk? Because I think most of us are aware at some level there is something about race that puts me at an advantage. See, everywhere. See, and that's why that becomes the most difficult topic to address. You see, but we can talk about it. Yes, we can even talk about economics. Yes, sure.
I have a good example of how we ran into this problem. We tried to solve something quickly with our bond decisions. Why do some people get a cash bond and a signature bond? It's very random, it seems to people, that why did this person get this amount and that amount? And so we tried to make that a little more uniform and have like a risk assessment tool to say, well, let's base this on objective factors, like who doesn't show up for court and who does. Well, people that don't show up for court would be people that maybe don't live here or haven't lived here very long, moved a lot of addresses, have a criminal conviction, don't have a job. Well, all those things, if you look at demographics, black people were more likely than whites have moved more likely not have had a job, more likely have had earlier intervention with the criminal justice system. So all we're doing is taking those racist systems and making it objective, but the outcome is still the same. And so we got rid of that one and now we're moving to a different one, but that's where we try to do the right thing with good intentions, but yet because the systems are still operating in a way that race is affected, then your supposedly objective tool will also take into account those other racist issues and just make it now in a formula. So that's why it's a difficult thing. You have to be careful to not just jump to a conclusion and a solution, because you have to consider that, well, police might arrest more black people than white people, at least proportionally in La Crosse. So people will just say to the police, you have to stop arresting so many black people. Well, again, why are they being arrested? Who's calling? What types of things are they calling in for? How much contact is there? So you can't just expect one part of our society to change without considering all the other parts of society that are affecting those decisions. So that's why it's a very complicated topic and a complicated change. It's not just, we can't just change one part of our system. It's going to be impacted by other parts of our system and our society. So.
I guess I'm just left with feeling a little bit like wondering then how are people of color supposed to feel safe? Our judicial system is there to enforce our laws, which are supposed to be there to protect American people. So how are people of color supposed to feel safe when racism is just everywhere? It's just systemic. So what?
So then,
I mean, but yeah, it's everywhere. But then
right.
Our judicial system is supposed to be there to then step in and be. I think that's why people are really looking at police, because they're supposed to be there to be the outlier of we're here to protect you. So even if everyone else is racist, they really should be the ones not, you know, and fighting against all of that. But that's not what's happening. So when we talk about making these tangible changes, I think that's what we're wondering is why can't it be that there's someone there to defend us, and why aren't those people in the judicial system?
Yeah. And again, I don't know if I have the answer, but when you look at systems around the country, it does tend to be the white people who have the power, so they end up being the DAs and the judges, and that, again, it's the product of our society. But again, those people in the system have to start being more aware of this, and that's, I think, the only way that that's going to change is that the people within the system do have to change and have to work at it, and things like inviting more people of color into our council, which we're working on right now, recruiting and keeping more people of color in the police force and in positions of power. But again, it's been this way for generations. It's not going to change overnight. But I think that's the only way to change it is to involve more people of color in those decisions, into those oversight boards, into those advisory councils, whatever you want to call them. More people on that supervision level to say this should be different than what it is. And then again, more on the bottom level, more interaction, more training, more being aware of this, that this is happening, this is real. And I think La Crosse is, again, better than most because at least we're talking about this. I know some of my counterparts around the state, they're not even close to even having a discussion with any partners in the system, much less opening up further. So if there is any hope locally, it's that we're having conversations like this, you're doing this, our local media is saying this is a story, you didn't have to do this. So I think everybody's at least on the same page that we've got to do something, and we're not going to just ignore it and say things are fine here, go look somewhere else. Do you have a better answer for that? You usually do.
Well, Candace, I don't want you to leave. Yes, and
I should say, if you're feeling uncomfortable, that's normal after talking to people. So you're feeling exactly the way you should after this.
I don't want you to leave feeling like, you know, we are not really addressing the issue. Yes, now of criminal justice. See, speaking for myself, I've interacted, yes, people, you know, in the criminal justice system. They seem to be caring people, you see, and this is another dichotomy. It's a false dichotomy that we have, that good people cannot be racist, you see. Now, these are good people. Most of them are, you know, very caring. They want the best for our community, and, you know. But the other problem is, you see, I'm going to quote Einstein here. I quoted Einstein during one of our Zoom talks. He just popped into my head. It seems he had said, you cannot solve a problem with the same consciousness that created it. Okay, one more time. You cannot solve a problem with the same consciousness that created it. Now, if I want to be honest with the people in the criminal justice system right now, including this committee that I'm on, you know what I would say to them? You created this problem. See, they have to be willing to sit with it. You see, you created this problem because the way you have set things up is to your advantage. When I see that motto, you know, drawn across, you know, the police cars, to serve and protect, as a person of color, how do I read it? To serve and protect white people from people of color. Okay, right? And based on the experiences I've had, you see, I'm an Indian man, yes, but I do have brown skin. I can share some very interesting experiences I've had. Yes, I've been in this country for more than 30 years now, right? So I get that upset. Yes, see, something gets stirred up in me when I see that. To serve and protect whom? See? So I would say to the folks in the committee, can you sit with that? You created this problem as a result of this consciousness. Okay. Now, you want to solve the problem? How have you changed your consciousness to solve the problem? If nothing has changed in terms of your consciousness, meaning how you look at race, systemic racism, nothing has changed, you are going to come with the same ideas, same opinions, right, that you've always done. How do you think that's going to fix the problem? See? So these are the things I'm hoping. See, so that's why I don't just want to focus on the criminal. To me, this is a much bigger problem, you see. And so you can ask these folks in the committee, this is the point Tim was making. We all went to the same schools. Yes, we all go to the same churches. See, the problems are here. So the consciousness that these folks are bringing to the criminal justice system, they're bringing the consciousness that they were ingrained with from all these other systems. So if all these other systems remain unchanged, they're all racist. You see where I'm going with this? How can we hope to see any changes in the criminal justice system? To me, that doesn't make sense. It's just not, it's illogical. See, because the pipeline, nothing has changed. The same, different people, same ideas. Same consciousness, replacing these people. How are things going to change? So that's why I'm trying to address, open it up. It's not just a criminal justice problem.
So you're the professor here. Again, what's our homework? For somebody who's watching this, what can we do to try to shift that consciousness then?
You can start, if you have not, start by reading something that otherwise you wouldn't read. Yes, just go to Amazon top 10 right now. I think almost all of them are about race and racism, anti-racism. Yes, start there. You have to start somewhere. Read. That does not mean you're done. Yes, and then talk with other people. White people, fine for starters, but then you need to step out. You need to step out and talk to people like me, people of color. And so that we can share our life experiences. You need to find out about my life experiences. And oftentimes I feel like what gets lost, something gets lost in the transition. You have to transit from book knowledge to real life knowledge. Right? There's a big difference. There's a big jump. And I feel like even very highly educated people don't seem to get this.
To knowing somebody who's actually been affected.
Yes, you need to be able to sit with them and talk to them. How have you been affected?
It's like learning a new language. Dustin and I both I've tried to, you actually do, learn other languages, and it's the same thing. You can read and read and read, but until you get out and actually speak with someone and use it, and for a lot of Americans, actually, they get lost in that translation of getting to that next step. So it's very similar.
It's any skill. If you want to be a surgeon, you can't just read books about surgeons. Okay, I'm good to go. Yes. Next patient. You've got to go out there and actually, do it.
Right.
And that is what seems to be getting lost.
Well, thank you both for being a part of this. I think this has been a really enlightening, challenging, uncomfortable at times situation, but like you said, it's what the conversations we need to be having.
Let me ask you a question to finish up, though.
Oh, wow, okay.
Well, you joined the council and you said you didn't want it to be a waste of your time and just be a mouthpiece. You're still on the council.
Yeah.
Do you see hope for the future? Do you see change happening in this community?
He asked me to continue. I said yes. So that should answer your question. There's some very good...
This is TV. I was hoping for more of a quote for you.
No, I like that. Leave it there.
Oh, wow.
They want sound bites.
You're continuing the work, so
Wow.
that's that next step, like you said.
No, I don't think it's about me. I said this earlier. It saves my energy when I feel like I'm talking to a wall, right? I don't feel that way when I talk to not everyone, but most people in the committee seems really serious. There are some wonderful people in the committee, and I think we as a community are very fortunate to have these people. My only concern is that they're not being heard right now. And if we can just hear these people, I think things can happen.
So there is hope.
Oh yes, there is hope.